However, a recent global study showed that which method of perception of the world we prefer, visual, auditory, gustatory, tactile or olfactory, is markedly different in different cultures. And this is reflected primarily in our native language. The study covered 20 languages spoken by residents of Europe, North and South America, Asia, Africa and Australia, and the territory from big modern cities to remote Aboriginal settlements. The results of the experiment showed that our lifestyle, environment and even the shape of our homes can affect how we perceive things, and how easily can you explain your perception of the words. We usually believe that it directly gives us information about the world, says Asifa Majid, professor of linguistics, communication and cultural cognition at the University of York, who led this study. This is partly explained by the fact that the area of the brain responsible for visual perception is much greater than that responsible for the odors, says the researcher. However, another important argument is the language. People say, well, look, in our language there are more words to describe what we see than for odors, she adds. However, said Majid, some companies are more focused on the smells or sounds. Her own research, Jahai language, which is spoken by a community of hunter-gatherers on the Malay Peninsula, showed the same rich vocabulary to describe odors, such as English for colors. The study brought together experts from such different languages as Umpal, spoken about hundreds of indigenous Australians, and English, which is spoken by nearly 1 billion people worldwide. A high level of coherence showed that the group has a shared way of describing, for example, certain colors. And low level, on the contrary, that the conventional vocabulary for these colors do not exist or a native speaker is unable to identify them. Speakers of Lao or Persian languages, on the other hand, more distinguished tastes. When they were asked to drink the bittersweet water, all native speakers of Persian had described her as tek id esti slide. Whereas the English participants of experiment reacted to this stimulus differently. They described the water as bitter, salty, sour, good, devoid of taste, peppermint, like earwax or medicine, says Majid. Interestingly, those linguistic communities which are able to accurately distinguish between the tastes of the Persians, Laotians and Cantons, the native dialect of Chinese, is known to the world exquisite culinary traditions, with a rich palette of flavors and aromas. However, native speakers Umpal was much easier to describe smells. The smells of the flowers in the language common to many hunter-gatherer societies, including the above-mentioned nationalities Jahi. Interestingly, this sensory distinction is maintained even in sign languages. The native Kotakolak, the sign language spoken by about 1,200 people of Bali, as well as the media and Umpal, had great difficulty describing colors. On the other hand, speakers of American and British Sign Language, easy to deal with this problem about the same way as native speakers of both variants of the English language. It also emerged that played a role, and such cultural factors as art and architecture. People from communities that are engaged in the production of decorative ceramics, better than described shape. Those whose common culture house with angles rather than round huts, better described the acute form. But members of musical communities to better distinguish sounds, even if they were not themselves musicians. For those of us who spend more time in front of the silent screen, without smell and color, than among the fragrant plants and the singing of musicians, research can be an incentive to search for new sensory experiences.